So anyway, I got the opportunity to share tonight, and I don't have a format. As you know, on Wednesday nights, Rick is going through the book of John, and he goes verse by verse, and he finishes someplace, and then he starts next week on the same place. On the weekends, we're teaching through the Great Adventure. I'd encourage you, if you're not a part of that, to be a part of that as well, as we're in the book of Lamentations now. And so generally, we'd be part of that format. So I get the unenviable job of picking anything I want from the Bible. And that's almost, I'd rather have somebody just say, okay, here, take this, study it, teach it, and see what the Lord would reveal to that, rather than having to go. And so I always have this habit of chewing off more than I can bite. And so we picked a big topic tonight. I'm going to try to narrow it down, but it all started as I was a few months ago just reading something, and it jumped out at me, and it had to do with the Ten Commandments. And as I began to look at that a little bit, I ended up, reading kind of on Moses and some of his characteristics and things. And so that really spoke to my heart, and I kept thinking to myself, if I ever get to teach again, this is what I want to teach. And of course, after a month or two goes by, you can't remember what that was, but the Lord brought it back. And so here we are tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about character. We're going to talk a little bit about integrity. We're going to talk a little bit about at least 2 of the 10 Commandments. So I'm going to ask you some questions up front to start you thinking, and then perhaps as we go through the scriptures, you'll be able to find some answers that would minister to your heart. So would your coworkers, would your family and friends consider you to be a person of integrity? What foundation do we use to answer that question? In other words, what is integrity? And we'll look at that tonight. So if you're not able to come up with an answer, we all have kind of a vague idea of what that is. And then the other thing that kind of trickles down, and as we go down to the foundational basic concepts to that, is are there any absolutes today in the lifestyle, in the world today? Are there any absolutes? And all 3 of these questions are kind of hooked together, and we'll see it's kind of the basis of that as we look at some of this. This concept of integrity, the word is found throughout the Bible in a number of places. One of the ones that stuck out at me is when the Lord said of Job, and the Lord was having this in Job chapter 1, 2, and 3. The Lord is having a discussion with Satan about Job. And that kind of gives us a little insight as to what goes on in that whole spiritual realm. The concept of God and Satan even talking is hard for me to even grasp. But he was having this conversation, and the Lord was telling Satan, have you considered my son, my servant Job? And that's a scary concept. But the Lord, speaking of Job to Satan, said, he is a blameless and upright man. In chapter 2, verse 3, he says, he still holds fast to his integrity. This was after the first number of calamities or tragedies that the Lord had allowed Satan to introduce into Job's life. And the Lord was pointing out he still holds fast to his integrity. And I know all of us from time to time may be put in that same position where we might have to go through that decision-making process about what our integrity really is and how long are we going to hold on to it in the face of different circumstances. And then later on, Job's wonderful and supportive wife in chapter 2, verse 9, asked Job, do you still hold fast to your integrity? Why don't you curse God and die? See, she even knew that he had integrity, and she knew what the opposite of that was, or to let go of that. The opposite of holding on to that integrity would be to curse God and die. And so later on, we see in David in Psalm 26, verse 1, he beseeches God with these words. He says, judge me, O Lord, for I have walked in my integrity. That'd be a hard place, but I think as we look at maybe what integrity involves, and tonight maybe some of us could actually say that. Lord, would you judge me? Because I have tried to walk in that concept of integrity. In Proverbs 11:3, it says, it gives us this word of encouragement. The integrity of the upright shall guide them. The integrity of the upright shall guide them. And so we all are looking for that People come for prayer and they're constantly, hey, how do I handle this? What do I do in this? And things, and we go back to those foundation concepts of what that integrity. So we see that as, he says, the integrity of the upright shall guide them. We see that even with Job, and later on we're going to see with Moses, that this integrity is a concept that has to do with our walk with God. And that's the way we walk with God, with this integrity. And we'll get more into what that really means but it's a part of our daily lives, the path that we go down, the way that we take step after step, the way we make decisions, the way we make choices. That integrity has to do with that. So we're going to look at a couple of things from the Ten Commandments. And basically, we're going to end up with two commandments that combined speak a lot to this issue of integrity. And it'll be commandments 8 and 9. Thou shalt not steal, and thou shalt not bear false witness against a neighbor, or to lie against a neighbor. So we picked those two, or I picked those two as combining together. You shall not steal, and you shall not bear false witness, or you shall not lie. And you put those two together, and they form a concept, if you will, of integrity that is unique to the other the other commandments. These could be defined as the Ten Commandments themselves could be defined as kind of like a building. It's so foundational to our lives as Christians. It's foundational to the law. It's foundational to what we believe in. It's foundational to integrity. And even though today we have this sense, here's these old 10 commandments, and life's so much more complicated than that. I may have shared with you before, but I one time was curious. I heard the Jews did some ridiculous thing, like they made over 600 laws out of the 10 commandments. And I just thought, that is ridiculous. How could you take 10 simple, basic commandments and turn them into 600 laws? And then, having been in law enforcement, laws were important to us, mostly just the criminal in Idaho, the 18 code, we called it, and the criminal aspect of the Idaho law. And I got thinking, well, how many laws are in that book? And then I realized that with the civil law and all the other kinds of laws, most law libraries and judges have a whole wall filled with the Idaho law. So I got this bright idea, and I called over to Boise, and I asked them, so how many laws does the state of Idaho have? So I was transferred to another area. They didn't know. The legislature didn't know. The clerks of the legislature didn't know. The clerks of the Supreme Court didn't know. I never found anybody in the state of Idaho that knew how many laws we had. They wouldn't even willing to take a guess. And there's so much constantly in change. So the Jews really did it pretty good. They kept it down to 600. And they're way ahead of where we were. I had no idea of the volume of laws that we have. But even the laws that we have in the criminal code in Idaho and the civil code and other laws that we have in Idaho are hugely based on these 10 commandments. As you go through them, you begin to see how a man named Blackstone began to write laws, and he based 80-90% of what he wrote on the Bible. And then what he wrote about law was translated and involved in our constitutional law, and the laws that we have today can find their roots in that. So here we have this foundation, and we're going to look at this a little bit as a foundation. We see the first 4 commandments of the 10 commandments that represent these cornerstones, if you will, of this foundation. And you guys that are in building and stuff, you're with me. I understand you got that down. You got the footings, you got laid, you got the foundation in your mind already going on, and the concrete poured and all that kind of thing. But just nothing can stand, whether it be a 911 tower or whether it be a building here or the gymnasium out here, with the pillars and the posts and the things that we poured as a foundation. For in our walk with God, the 10 commandments have in the past, continue today to form and be the basis of that foundation. So the first 4, you shall have no other gods before me, you shall not make for yourself a carved image. Number 3, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And number 4, honor the Sabbath to keep it holy. These are the 4 cornerstones. And some of you know, well, wait a minute, the Sabbath, we really aren't doing much. We do have a Saturday night service for those of you that want to worship on the Sabbath. But for the rest of us, we aren't practicing that. But the Scripture goes on in the New Testament to say that Jesus is our Sabbath rest. So in a way, Jesus is the very cornerstone and foundation that all the other cornerstones and foundations, even in the Ten Commandments that were given to Moses on those tablets. So that is foundational. That is critical. Jesus has become our rest. Jesus has become that foundation, that pillar, if you will, that all these other things stand on. So those are 4 commandments that basically deal with our relationship with God. And they are between man and God, or maybe the other way around would be better said, for him to give us direction so that we can have peace, we can have life, we can have and enjoy the freedoms and the things that God had designed for us. By the way, there was a wise Bible teacher once that said, every time you see that concept in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not, instead of being like, oh yeah, and kind of getting defensive on that, think about that as God is really saying to you, don't hurt yourself. And if you follow these commandments with that, saying everything that God is saying for us to do in these 10 commandments is for our benefit so that we don't hurt ourselves. If we'll have no other gods before you, if you won't make for yourself a carved image, and if you won't take the name of the Lord in vain, and you'll honor that Sabbath, that you'll allow Jesus to be your Sabbath rest, you won't be hurt. You'll actually prosper, and it'll be a foundation for you. That's God's heart when he gave us these 10 commandments. Now, the rest of the commandments are thou shalt, or some of the commandments, do this, and thou shalt do that. And that's, you could rephrase that and put that context as you read that into do yourself a favor. Help yourself out. Do this. You shall do this. And if you do this, you're going to prosper. If you do this, and that's God's heart when we have these concepts of rules and things. As the class in self-confrontation knows, as I teach that class, it says on the board every week, it says up there on the top of the board, if you are willing and obedient, you will eat the good of the land. That's from Isaiah 1:19, and it's kind of my life verse. It's kind of one of the verses I use, and it actually is very, very foundational in the whole concept of self-confrontation that we deal with as part of the discipleship school. So don't miss the opportunity to sign up for next time if you want to eat the good of the land and to be a part of that. But we see that. So anyway, that's those 4 cornerstones that the other 6 are laid on. And the other 6 have to do with our relationship horizontally with each other. Number 5, honor your father and mother. That has to do with the home. You shall not murder. That has to do with anger and sanctity of life. In number 7, you shall not commit adultery. That has to do with sex and marriage. And number 8, you shall not steal. That has to do with property, ownership, possessions. And number 9, you shall not bear false witness. And that has to do with the truth. And number 10, you shall not covet. And that has to do with the whole concept of contentment. As Timothy said, godliness with contentment is great gain. So, this is an issue, this is a teaching tonight about integrity. That's going to be the foundational concept that we're dealing with here. And the concept of absolutes. And by the way, I shared that up front with you guys to let you know I've been thinking about this for a couple of months. This has nothing to do, well, it has everything to do with the election in a couple of weeks. But the initial part of it had nothing to do with that concept. That wasn't on my mind until as I studied it out, I began to see that it has a lot to do with that. And again, we're looking at that whole concept of integrity. So, integrity, and we're going to combine again, like I said, the 8th commandment of stealing and the 9th commandment that has to deal with lying with our integrity. And we're going to combine those 2 together. And there's a reason for that I'll get to in a minute. But the first one we're going to deal with is the matter of stealing. Thou shalt not steal and take things that don't belong to you. So what do you think would be the good direct definition of integrity, since that's what we're talking about tonight? There's lots of different definitions out there, but I think the one that resonates with me and seems to be that stick with me the most is that integrity is what you do when nobody's looking. Integrity is what I do when nobody is looking. But again, if we don't have any absolutes, if there's no foundation to stand on, then it's kind of like whatever you do and don't get caught, and that kind of thing. And that's a whole different thing. That's more what the world is doing today. But from a biblical perspective, this is what we do when no one is looking, and obviously lined up with the whole concept of these commandments. So the first and the eighth commandment that we'll deal with is stealing. And the definition of stealing something is to deprive someone of ownership. So I have taken something that doesn't belong to you, and there's lots and lots of ways in the code book that have to do with defining what that stealing is. And a lot of it has to do with what the punishment is for that theft. A lot of it has to do with the value of that theft. So it used to be that in Idaho, anytime you stole some kind of livestock from somebody, that was a felony. That was a grand theft if it fell under the category of livestock. But I really had a hard time when they've repealed that law, they've changed it. And when I first went to work thinking of throwing somebody in prison for several years for a felony theft for stealing a chicken. And I just couldn't do it. Now maybe if this was Chick-fil-A or something, they have more value involved in that, But so over the years, this whole concept of the difference between a felony and misdemeanor and thing has been changed. But basically the whole thing still comes down to the eighth commandment. Stealing is defined as depriving someone of ownership of something. It could be money, it could be possessions, it can be time, it could be wages, it could be cars, it can be by force, it can be by deception, it could be by fraud, and it can even be something as simple as finders keepers. And that even is talked about in Exodus. If you find something that isn't yours and you keep it, you have committed a theft. And your job is to make every effort to return that to the original owner. It's an affront to God when we steal, and a sin against man. But you say, everybody does it, to some extent or another. And unfortunately, there's a lot of truth in that statement. But it's not a justification, because remember, we're dealing with an absolute. And it's a matter of integrity. And maybe everyone does do that. But folks, you wouldn't be here on a Wednesday night if you're everyone. Hopefully you are a Christian. And you and I as Christians are not everyone. And there are absolutes that we believe in, starting with these 10 commandments and this commandment as well, as we will not steal. In law enforcement, I have taken many, many theft reports over 24 years, and burglaries and thefts. Not much to share in the way of that. I couldn't think of any real fun war stories to share with you, but I do remember one time that I was fascinated with a known, convicted thief that reported a theft. And I realized there's nobody more indignant about getting ripped off than somebody that has ripped off other people. And it was hard to keep a straight face and to show a lot of sympathy for this person that had been known for a lifetime of stealing and those kinds of things, and just indignant to the max that somebody would rip him off. And we weren't even sure in the first place he hadn't stolen the item that was stolen, but that was just kind of beside the point. We took the report and processed it. We took the report anyway. So the sad part is that in that 24-year career, I've been involved in the discipline and even the arrest of several police officers. I remember one sergeant who gave up his career over a $20 bill. And he kind of helped himself to that $20 bill from a man that died suddenly, and they were doing just kind of an investigation to see what the circumstances were, and one of the rookies was doing the investigation, and the sergeant came and helped himself from the man's wallet, but he didn't know the rookie had inventoried his wallet, and so he was given the opportunity to resign. And so you see that concept of integrity, and that there are absolutes. And obviously we don't get caught every time we do that, but that's kind of behind or beyond the point. And then we find a lot of theft of time. I was talking to a retailer here in Idaho Falls that I know very well and have known for years, and that's one of the biggest issues they have as far as employees go. And I remember with the sheriff's office, that was even internally one of the things that we were always investigating, false timesheets and not working the hours they were set, especially for those officers that were self-directed, if you will. They didn't have any immediate supervisors over them. Maybe they worked in the outlying areas and things like that. It was constantly a problem and things, but it was the theft of time. And again, it's a matter of absolutes, and it's a matter of integrity. Speaking of employee and employers, this decay is so accepted, this undermining of these foundations, these pillars, if you will, that hold all of life up, like telling the truth and not stealing from one another, loving other people enough not to take their stuff, to actually watch over their stuff, has gone down in our society. The lack of absolutes has gotten to the level where people with no conscience whatsoever are actually biting the hands that feed them. In the United States of America today, the average is that 7% of nationwide sales have been and are being stolen by the employees. 59% of those thefts are by men, 41% by women, 37% of those thefts are by managers. One, statistically, in 30 employees in the United States will be arrested every year for stealing from the company, for stealing from the boss, having their hand in the till. Numbers don't mean much to me. I wish I could throw a big pile of money on the stage here and so that we could get a grasp for it, but these kind of numbers really don't hit. But the estimated value of those thefts by employees from their employer is $50 billion a year. That's $137 million a day. 37% of bankruptcies in the United States are caused by employee theft. These lines get so easily blurred. Absolutes have decayed to the point where there's a rationalizing process that goes on. And it's only wrong if you get caught. It's only you have a right to do this because the company owes you and hasn't paid you what you're really worth, and on it goes. And then that whole concept again, everybody does it. And the company's so rich, they won't miss it. That's out the back door. That's where the employees go. This is the shoplifting. $10 to $13 billion a year nationwide. That's 1 to 1.2 million shoplifting incidents every day at a loss of $19,000 to $25,000 a minute in the United States. That's what's going on. But did you catch that difference? This is way less than the employee theft. The employee theft is huge. And I'm talking about here in Idaho Falls. This isn't some, like downtown LA or something. This is here in Idaho, not those numbers for here in Idaho Falls, but the whole concept that employee theft, stealing from their bosses, stealing from their companies, has exceeded the shoplifting, the amount that's going out. The owners would settle for the shoplifting if they could do away with the employees that are stealing. Remember that first question? How are you doing in the integrity area? This is absolutely, teetotally, completely wrong. Whether you're a Christian or not, it's still wrong. Paul said in Ephesians 4:28, he said, "Let him who stole steal no longer, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give to him who has need." Did you get that? That's the reason we work, is so that we have an abundance, so that we have extra, not just to take care of ourselves, not just to be self-centered. And I call this over-the-top theology. This is who the God that we serve is. This is actually kind of the definition, the difference between grace and mercy. Mercy is just not getting what we deserve, and grace is getting like a gift, let alone not getting what we deserve, but getting a gift for doing something that's not right. It's not, we don't get it for doing something, but that's just who this over-the-top God is in the way that he serves us and takes care of us. And he's set that up so that you and I go to work, and that we're to work hard, and we're not to steal any longer, and we're to make an excess, and with that excess, we are to work with our hands what is good, that he may have something to give to he who has need. Man, that's awesome. But again, we see that whole concept is way over the top from what I'm talking about here down at the foundation, this pillar, if you will, of integrity. And so that's the concept of stealing. Now remember, there's two pillars that I wanted to combine, and the second pillar was the 9th commandment, which is a matter of integrity, but it's being a false witness or lying. First off, God hates a liar. Proverbs 16 through 19 talks about that. He says there are 6 things the Lord hates, yea, 7 are an abomination to him. 2 of those 7 that God hates are a lying tongue and a false witness who speaks lies. And so if you and I are participating now, we've switched from stealing to lying, if that pillar, if that foundational quality is not in our lives, if we're not aligning ourselves with the truth in every aspect of what we do, then that activity, God hates. Now, I got enough trouble in my life. I don't need God hating what I do. I need him on my side totally, completely, all the time. But when we align ourselves up with lying and bearing false witness about somebody else, we are lining ourselves up with that which God hates. And that's the choice that we have made. In Revelation 21:8, and this is a fun verse to take home and memorize and hang on your mirror, but the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Jesus said in Matthew 5:37, but let your yes be yes, and your no be no. For whatever is more than these is from the evil one. So now it begins to be clear. And now we begin to see why I picked these 2 pillars, if you will, the pillars of stealing and the pillars of lying, and their correlation and the connection. We need to stop lying and we need to stop stealing, period. Don't let us forget what Jesus accomplished for us, though, before I get into it further. If this describes you, I don't want to, sometimes I get ahead of myself and I forget this concept, but under the New Testament, the law is placed there to show us that we failed, but even beyond that, Jesus came so that we might have grace. The law brings death, and life came through Jesus Christ. In 1 John 1:9, it says if we confess our sins, he's faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Those gloom and doom consequences of lying and stealing can be, not easily, but can be erased when we turn, change direction, and go a different direction and ask for forgiveness for that. We can and will be forgiven for those things that we do that aren't right. But I want you to, I didn't want to forget that, but I want to go back to that. Let me go back to that verse. It says that for whatever is more, Jesus said, is from the evil one. We're going to deal with this just a touch more, but why these pillars are so important is that stealing and lying are part of the very nature of Satan, of the devil. And so that's what makes these pillars. The other things like murder and adultery and all these things are still violations in a sense, but they're more person to person. They're more, they're still bad, don't misunderstand me. But now we've crossed over with these 2 things, lying and stealing, into the very realm, the very language, the very character of Satan. That's what makes these 2 pillars so vulnerable, number one, to Satan's use and attacks, but so heinous in their what they're doing to us in our lives if we're participating in those kinds of things. I read, interestingly enough, on Monday, there was a study that came out on October 24th that describes honesty as a slippery slope. Now, most of us, especially in law enforcement, we understand this concept. But this study goes on, it says serial untruths, moreover, register a diminishing emotional response in the brain. Researchers have reported in Natural Neuroscience. It's a magazine. This study is the first empirical evidence that dishonest behavior escalates when it is repeated, said this author, Neil Garrett, a researcher in the Department of Experimental Psychology at the University College of London. Physiologically, in your brain, as they did MRIs and these other studies to see the physiological responses to people that were lying, every time you lie, it gets easier. There is a diminished physiological activity in the brain that whole concept that every lie is easier. And it went on in that study to talk about that every time you lie, it gets bigger. We're going from white lies to whoppers here. And your internal mechanism of defense against that is going at the opposite grade from that. It's getting easier and easier to tell bigger and bigger lies. That is a physiological thing. And most of you moms have said that to your kids. And we recognize that concept. It didn't always work out very well for me, but I had this concept. And in law enforcement, I'd go up and there'd be some kind of interview process going on, and we've got witnesses here and over here and suspects, and they're all separated, and 2 or 3 cops are interviewing different people trying to get to the truth. Imagine that, so that we can make decisions and choices. And sometimes after a few minutes in a conversation, I would pop off, and I got myself in trouble with my mouth, but I would just look at somebody and I'd say, you know what, I don't know what it is about this shirt. Every time I put it on, people lie to me. And it kind of went south from there. But it's like when the truth would serve them better because of habit, people lie. That physiological response they've just discovered as it gets easier and easier to lie is probably the underlying reason that the polygraph has not been accepted as admissible in court. It's a great investigative tool, and it's very, very accurate, but there becomes a point of diminishment to where you can enter into like a psychopathical liar, and you don't even have any guilt anymore if it gets to that point, and that won't show up on the polygraph. There are other issues, there are other ways of measuring that, and a good polygraph operator can discern those. So anyway, here's the primary issue again. I'm going to say it again because some of you have drifted off, so I want to bring you back. Pay attention, wake up. Lying and stealing are both characteristics of Satan. Jesus is truth. Satan is a liar. Everything on the planet can be reduced to those two concepts, good and evil. We see that dichotomy, if you will, of black and white, hot and cold, light and darkness, all those kinds of things. But lying and stealing are part of the biblical definitions of who Satan is. And that's why I picked these 2 pillars to talk about, to encourage us. Since we are not like everyone else, we are Christians. We need to be setting the example in the workplace. We need to be setting the example in our families and things, and not let any hint of a lie or taking something that doesn't belong to us get into that place or allow us to be a part of that. Satan is a liar. So the battle rages. We have God, we have Jesus, the Holy Spirit here that represents truth. Truth is actually the name of the Holy Spirit, one of the names of the Holy Spirit. And we have Satan, who is the father of lies. That's his natural language over here. And guess what's in the middle? You, me. We are where this comes down, where this battle takes place in us. Satan is the source and the father of lies. John 8:44 says, you are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it. This battle goes way beyond the whole concept of just breaking one of God's laws. We are actually, by lying, entering into the very language, entering into the very character, entering into the whole concept of who Satan is and is evil. I don't mean you're possessed. I don't mean anything like that. But now you're starting to use a language. Satan is the father, is the source of lies. So when you and I tell a lie, something that's not a truth, whether it be an exaggeration or any kind of thing, now we have begun to speak the language of Satan to our coworkers, to our bosses, to our family, to our friends, to our husbands, to our wives. We've begun to speak that language. The thief, Satan, does not come except to steal, kill, and destroy. Sometime we won't take the time tonight, but sometime if you want to look at the Genesis 3, verses 1 through 5, it's a little story where the serpent is speaking to Eve. And there's 5 verses there. And sometime, just for fun, a little exercise, it won't take very long, but look and see how many lies you can find in those 5 verses. And Satan isn't going to just hit you with a great big lie. Well, he will, and he can, and does. But most of the time, we see how subtle they are. And I think you're going to have to actually look at this. I'll give you a hint. There's 4. But you're going to have to look at this to actually pull those out and see them. They're going to miss, but they're so subtle. And that's where that language that he uses. There is someone out there in our world today that has never, ever told the truth. His name is Satan. And his objective is to make you and I lie, because when we do, now we have turned our back on God and we have gone a different direction. We have aligned ourselves with the opposite of who God is. He wants to make you lie. He wants you to believe a lie, and he wants you to live a lie. But the good news is there's also somebody out there that's never, ever, ever, ever told a lie, and that's Jesus. He is truth. And in John 18:37, it says, "For this cause I was born, and for this cause I came into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth." Of his Spirit, Jesus said in John 16:13, "However, when he, the Spirit of truth," that's his name, "has come, he will guide you into all truth." That's his occupation, to guide us into all truth. But see, again, we've been given this incredible gift. In 1 John 5:6, it adds that, and it is the Spirit that bears witness, because the Spirit is truth. That's his character. The Spirit is truth. But see, you and I have been given this gift. And the gift that we've been given is the gift of choice. And so you and I have to make a conscious decision. And as these little things come at you and I throughout the day, we've all made a decision. Hey, I want to be a Christian. I want to live like a Christian. I want to tell the truth. We've got the big part going on. We've got that understanding. We've grasped most of that. At least, hopefully, I'm assuming that most of you have come to that point. And that you really want to tell the truth. But then when it comes down to that one little tiny second, when you're now faced with an opportunity, and you get to decide, do I tell the truth in this situation, or do I kind of fudge? Do I kind of go around the edge? And all those little things that Satan says, it really doesn't matter that much. It's just a little white lie. Nobody will get hurt. And the most important one, I think the basis, at least from my standpoint, I'm not an expert in this area, and I'm still learning and things, is that oftentimes there's a fear. When we tell the truth, it might make me look bad. Or even the area of exaggeration, I might exaggerate something to help me look better in the eyes of somebody else. That whole concept is like a preoccupation with self rather than be preoccupied with God. If we're preoccupied with God and He is truth, we're going to tell the truth when that little second hand goes tick, tick, tick. And we get that opportunity to make that decision. Am I going to tell the truth or am I going to lie? And obviously we don't say lie like that. We say fudge, we say a little bit of deception. Nobody really knows. There's no way of finding out. My word against their word. All those little kinds of things, those little whisperings like Satan used on Eve, they worked. He's still using them today on me and on you. And that subtle, subtle thing. And you have to be predisposed in your mind. I will tell the truth. And things. And even then, you're going to hit that 1 second. And I'm just speaking by myself. Maybe you guys don't struggle with this. You're going to stand at that moment of waffling. There's another concept where it's talked about, and it has to do, it's interrelated, and just talk about that concept of a false witness. And then how our response should be when somebody maligns our character, our reputation, and says something that's hurtful to you. It happens in the workplace a lot. I know jockeying for position and things, and you hear what somebody else says. I don't even get in the whole Facebook world, so I could probably have illustrations for the rest of the night. But in that whole world where people say things that hurt your character or your reputation, that's called a false witness. And just going to touch on this for a moment. David was maligned, lied about. False witnesses were telling about his character all the time. In Psalm 35:11, David said, false witnesses rise up. They laid to my charge things I do not know. They rewarded me evil for good to the spoiling of my soul. But as for me, when they were sick, my clothing was sackcloth. I humbled myself with fasting. My prayer returned to my own heart. I behaved myself as though I had been a friend, it had been my friend or brother. I bowed heavily as one that mourns for his own mother. David grasped this concept just as Jesus teaches us that we are to pray for our enemies. And this is, again, another example of that whole concept of being over the top. That God He wants you to humble yourself and to pray for those who speak ill of you, who spitefully use you, who tell lies about you, and instead of rising up in arms and exasperation and anger and things, just pray for them and humble yourself as David did. That's the way we get past those kinds of things. And it says in 5:11 of Matthew 5:11, Jesus went on to say, blessed are you when men shall revile you and persecute you and say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Here's the key ingredient. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets who were before you. The first job when you have a false witness against you is to rejoice, if it's for supporting the Lord. And then leap for joy. Secondly, pray for those who defile your reputation. And you will be free from the effects of that false witness against you. Well, we better start to wind up to begin the process of concluding. So, stealing and lying come from Satan. And when we engage in these activities, we are actually surrendering to him, not in a kind of possession kind of thing, but surrendering to his will, to his authority. We are changing sides over to the enemy's side by stealing and by lying. This matter of integrity is such a vital part and parcel of our lives, who we are as Christians, because it is so diametrically opposed to the way the world is doing things today. We have asked in our culture to remove God from ourselves, from our courts, from our government, and from our schools. It's no wonder that those foundations have decayed and are beginning to crumble to the point that there is no such thing as absolute truth. By the way, I see some of you young people in here tonight, so if you ever run into that concept where a teacher says something as bold as there is no absolute truth, just politely raise your hand and ask that teacher nicely, so is that statement true or not? Some of you are fairly quick. You get that concept. But it's just a nice way of saying that it can't be, it's just repeating something that's just not even true. It's just it's a weird kind of reasoning. But the opposite of the truth is a lie, and we don't even have to tell a lie if we can take the power and authority of the concept and the integrity of the concept of truth and take it away and say there is no such thing as absolute truth. Truth is what you and I make it, is what we're going to hear. There's no absolutes. It's a gray area. That is categorically untrue. And if you don't know your Bible, if you don't know what the Word of God says, if you don't really understand the foundational concepts, these pillars of integrity, of Satan's characteristics through these 10 commandments, you and I are both going to fall for these concepts. I wasn't going to say anything, but with the election, we see the outgrowth of that lack of integrity, that lack of absolute truth, to where now we are faced with a whole country that doesn't have any idea of absolute truth. And the concept of lying is expected, it's tolerated, it's a part of the fabric of our culture because we have set aside completely these concepts that I'm sharing with you. Everybody does it. That may be true, but you're not everybody. I'm not everybody. We're Christians. We need to be set apart. We need to be different, just as Jesus is holy, which means to be set apart. His language is truth. He came to bear witness to the truth. You and I need to do that, but it's a choice. And here's the bonus. Again, we talked about over the top. In John 8:32, Jesus said, "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." There's a fantastic bonus that goes along with this, but it's a choice of whether or not you want to be truly free or you want to be in bondage to the results of the lies and of the stealing, taking those things that just you don't want to have any part of that. A couple real quick illustrations. I told you I was beginning to wrap it up and things, but I want to tell you two quick stories about, there was a gentleman here that came up to me for prayer. It's been years, so don't try to guess who it is and things, but he'd been hired as a young boy out at the site. I mean, like 18, 19, that kind of thing. And it was just a temporary to help out, to do some things, filled out a quick application, threw it in, ended up working out really well, ended up with a career. And so then 15 years later, along comes 911. And so many of you know that have worked out at the site, they totally redid all the background. He had lied on his application. Now they're redoing the applications, and he came up front for prayer and in a panic because several people at work had already lost their jobs because they too had lied on their applications. And he's like, what do I do? This is my career now. I've got like 15, 20 years in this deal, and I don't know anything else. And yet I lied on this application. And so I just said, tell the truth. You know, and he sucked some of the room out of the air, or some of the air out of the room, maybe some of both, and things. And I says, and it gets worse. I'm going to give you some advice. I want you to go in Monday morning, and I want you to knock on your boss's door, and I want you to sit down, and I want you to tell him what he did before they come to you with this information. He said, they'll fire me. He said, that's what the rules say. They have to fire me. And I said, well, the truth will set you free. I said, Jesus is truth. You're a Christian now. He wasn't a Christian then. And things, you're a Christian now. You have to align yourself with the truth. And of course, he wasn't free. He wasn't sleeping well and those kinds of things. So a couple of weeks later, they suspended him. and put him on suspension until they investigated that kind of thing. And he came up for prayer again. But at the end of the deal, after about a month, the site came out, and his boss wanted to promote him. And he said, if you, for threat of your job, would tell me the truth, he said, that's the kind of employee I want working for me. I've fought long and hard these last 3 weeks that I want you not only on my shift, I want you to be a supervisor. And they gave him more and more responsibility. And his career now is just literally thriving. There are other companies that are seeking him to go work for them. And that's just what Jesus said. You tell the truth, and the truth will set you free. There may be consequences. It could just as easily have gone the other way. But when we align ourselves up with Jesus and Jesus' truth, then the outcome is that we will be free. And this morning in our Proverbs, it says, the wicked flee when no one pursues them. When no one pursues. But the righteous are bold as a lion. I was just thinking how many times that we've arrested people and they've just thanked us. I've been running for months. Do you know what it's like to have a cop underneath every bush, to have everybody, that just knows that I'm guilty, and everywhere I go, I have this constant dread and fear. Thank you for arresting me. Sure, get in the back, lock the doors. And we don't, if you've lived a bold or a righteous life, you understand what that means. You don't have a concept of this. I had no idea that they were going through that, and then to find out it was actually a Bible verse. So anyway, I could tell several more stories about that whole concept of the truth will set you free. And you sleep really good, you have a good conscience, and you have a great relationship with God, and you've literally kind of in Satan's face as you've made that choice to tell the truth that sets you free. Let's pray. Thank you, Jesus, that you are truth. You are the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through you. So, Lord Jesus, I just pray that you'd help all of us to make those choices and those decisions to follow you, to honor you, to align ourselves up with truth, no matter what the rest of the world is doing. As they go south, Lord, help us to go north and help us to follow you, Lord Jesus, that we might be examples, and that through that repentance, Lord Jesus, that we might find that forgiveness and find that mercy and that grace and that ability to go make things right, that we might have and be bold as a lion, just in our righteousness, Lord, in your righteousness in us. So, Lord, if there's anyone out there tonight that just maybe is struggling and there's some things on their mind that you've touched and put your finger on, I just pray, Lord Jesus, you would help them to make that choice to go make things right. And we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.